Okay, now I will be reviewing the anterior lateral system or spinothalamic tract. This is the somatosensory information for pain or temperature. It also has 3 neurons, just like the DCML pathway, that start at the dorsal root ganglion and end at the somatosensory cortex, and we will now trace the 3 neurons. The first neuron starts in the dorsal root ganglion, and it terminates right away in the dorsal horn in an area called the substantia gelatinosa. That's the first neuron, and it's done. Its origin and termination is ipsy to each other. The second neuron also starts in the dorsal horn. Some of them spread out around it, but all you have to know is that it starts in the dorsal horn. It crosses over through the ventral white commissure and continues in a tract that we will now follow called the ALS/STT. So basically, if I pointed here and I said origin, you would say dorsal root ganglion, and it would be ipsy. And this is also the termination for the first neuron. So the second neuron starts here, and we're going to follow it right here. So from this point, the origin is the dorsal horn, and it is contra, because it crosses over right away. So anytime you're following the DCML, the origin is contra in the dorsal horn. And one thing I also mentioned is that it doesn't have to be at the cervical spinal cord level. It could be, you could have a thoracic spinal cord picture here or a lumbar spinal cord picture here. Wherever you feel the pain or temperature is where it's going to come in. They all have dorsal horns. They all have ventral white commissures. So it's going to be under, in the spinal cord, the SCT-ALS travels under the ventral horn, just right here, the thin part. Then we're going to go into the motor decussation. This is in the medulla, and it's still it's right here on the side of it on both sides. It's like right here. SCT-ALS. Right underneath the spinal nucleus of 5 is the SCT-ALS. We're in the medulla. Motor decussation. Moving up, this is the sensory decussation, still in the medulla. It is right above the olive, the inferior olivary nucleus. The SCT-ALS is going to be right above the olive right here. Then we're still tracing it up, still in the medulla. We're at the level at 10-12, fat butterfly. The SCT-ALS is right above the inferior olivary nucleus, same place, right there. Don't forget, this is the medial lemniscus right here, carrying the DCML pathway. This is the ALS-STT. Moving up to the level of 8-9, thin butterfly. It is right here above the olive, same place as it has been in the other ones. DCML is still right here. Moving up a level to 6-7. 6-7 has an enclosed fourth ventricle, and it is large. The DCML is, the DCML is right here. We learned this. The SCT-ALS is right next to it. It's moving closer, like right there. ALS-STT. To the level of 5. Level of 5 also has an enclosed fourth ventricle, but it's smaller. At the level of 5, the DCML meets the STT-ALS. They come together to form one line. This is the DCML. The STT-ALS is like right on the outside of it. These are still the arms of the DCML man, and these are the legs. And then here's the ALS. It doesn't have topography. We don't know about that yet. Moving up to the level of 4, this looks like a frog. Remember here we have a boomerang shape. It becomes a boomerang shape. I told you that the DCML, or just the medial lemniscus, is the bottom half of this boomerang. The ALS-STT is the top half of this boomerang. The DCML is the bottom half of the boomerang. The ALS/STT is the top half of the boomerang at level 4. That looks like a frog. At the level of 3, you still have the boomerang on both sides. Just as in 4, the ML is the bottom half, the ALS-STT is the top half of the boomerang. And finally, this is what we've been doing, is we've been tracing the second neuron of the ALS-STT. It went from the dorsal horn, followed all the way up the way we traced it, and then terminates in the VPL of the thalamus. That's the end of the second neuron. The origin of the fiber is here, dorsal horn. The laterality of the origin is contra, because remember it crossed over right away through the ventral white commissure. This is the second neuron. The third neuron starts here. Third neuron starts in the VPL of the thalamus and also goes to the primary somatosensory cortex, which is also known as the post-central gyrus. It's this part that's colored. And there is topography: legs, trunk, arms, and then face we'll learn later. Okay, so similarities between the two systems. DCML and ALS/SCT both have 3 neurons. The first neurons are ipsilateral to their origin and termination are ipsilateral to each other. The second neurons in both the systems cross over, so the termination is contra to the origin of the second neurons. And the third neurons in both of the systems start in the VPL, go through the posterior limb of the internal capsule, and terminate in the primary somatosensory cortex, because this is sensory information.